No. I mean, yes, I got a letter, but I didn't know it was from you. I thought it's from a fan, you know. So he said, no, it's from me.
Pattie Boyd finally opens up about a subject that has intrigued fans and the media for decades: the alleged jealousy that Yoko Ono reportedly felt toward her. For years, whispers and rumors have circulated about Yoko's complicated emotions surrounding Pattie, especially considering their shared connection with legendary musician John Lennon. But what truly fueled the jealousy, if there even was any? In this video, we'll delve into the complex relationships between Pattie Boyd, Yoko Ono, and John Lennon, and uncover the speculations, frustrations, and emotions that played a role. Was it Yoko's insecurities? Was there a deep-rooted rivalry that lasted for years? Or is it just the result of media portrayal and public opinion? Join us as we break down this fascinating topic with multiple perspectives and shed light on what Pattie Boyd herself has revealed. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more exclusive insights into the lives of music's most iconic figures. You won't want to miss this jaw-dropping look at one of rock and roll's most intriguing love triangles. Setting the stage. In the late 1960s, a pivotal moment in both John Lennon's personal and professional life occurred when he met Yoko Ono. At the time, the Beatles were at the height of their fame, but behind the scenes, they were grappling with tension, both as a band and as individuals. John, who had long struggled with his identity and relationships, was at a crossroads. His marriage to Cynthia Lennon, his childhood sweetheart, was beginning to unravel, and he felt increasingly alienated from the group. Into this complex period stepped Yoko Ono, a Japanese-born artist whose avant-garde ideas and conceptual art challenged conventional norms. Their first encounter was at one of Yoko's art exhibitions in London in 1966. At the time, John had already been experimenting with more experimental and surreal art, and he was drawn to Yoko's unique, challenging work. Yoko, known for her unorthodox approach to art and performance, was equally intrigued by John's boundary-pushing musical style. Their initial interactions were centered around art, with John attending several of her exhibits and performances, but it wasn't long before their connection deepened on a personal level. Yoko Ono was not like the women John had previously known. She was independent, self-assured, and intellectually stimulating. Yoko was not interested in simply being a rock star's wife, a role that many of the Beatles' partners had taken on. Instead, she was deeply involved in her own artistic pursuits, and her sense of purpose and autonomy drew John in. His attraction to Yoko was not just physical, but intellectual and emotional. In contrast to Cynthia, who had always supported John from a distance and kept a low profile, Yoko presented an equal partnership, one based on mutual respect for each other's artistic endeavors. However, as John's relationship with Yoko grew closer, it started to affect his personal life and his marriage. John's wife, Cynthia, was aware of the increasing distance between them, both emotionally and physically. While John had always been a complicated figure, this new relationship with Yoko marked a dramatic shift in his behavior. He became increasingly obsessed with Yoko, and as a result, his marriage to Cynthia became strained. The couple eventually separated in 1968, and their divorce was finalized in 1969. At the same time, the dynamic within the Beatles was becoming increasingly fraught. The group's internal conflicts had been simmering for years, and John's relationship with Yoko only seemed to exacerbate the tensions. Many of John's bandmates, particularly Paul McCartney, were uncomfortable with Yoko's growing influence in John's life and in the band's creative process. Yoko was often present during recording sessions, which did not sit well with the other members of the Beatles, who valued their creative space and the established group dynamic. Her presence was seen as a disruptive force, and some even speculated that her influence was part of what led to the eventual breakup of the band. However, Yoko and John were undeterred. By 1969, their relationship had solidified, and they became increasingly inseparable, both in their personal and professional lives. They began to make music together, and their collaborations resulted in some of John's most famous solo work, such as the album Plastic Ono Band. Their artistic endeavors also extended beyond music. They became prominent political activists, staging public protests against the Vietnam War and advocating for peace. The couple's infamous bed-in for peace in 1969, where they spent a week in bed in Amsterdam as a form of protest, became a symbol of their commitment to both their relationship and their ideals. John and Yoko's relationship was deeply controversial. Many fans and members of the media saw Yoko as the catalyst for the disintegration of the Beatles, with some even blaming her for breaking up the band. Her avant-garde art and public persona made her a polarizing figure, and her relationship with John further fueled the scrutiny. Despite the criticism, John remained unwavering in his love for Yoko. For him, their connection was transformative, both personally and creatively. By the time the Beatles officially disbanded in 1970, John and Yoko had already become a power couple in the world of art and activism. They had cemented their place as one of the most unconventional and controversial couples in rock history. Through their partnership, they not only reshaped John's personal life, but also left an indelible mark on the cultural landscape of the 1960s and beyond. Their love story, marked by art, activism, and intense devotion, would remain one of the most talked-about relationships in music history. Alleged jealousy. The narrative of Yoko Ono's jealousy of Pattie Boyd has been a persistent topic of conversation and speculation among Beatles fans and the media alike. The two women, though seemingly from different worlds, Yoko, the avant-garde artist and provocateur, and Pattie, the model-turned-photographer and former wife of two Beatles, shared a complicated relationship, shaped by the men they were married to and the dynamics of their respective social circles. While there is no concrete evidence of animosity between Yoko and Pattie, several factors contributed to the belief that Yoko might have felt jealous or insecure in her relationship with John Lennon. The first signs of tension. One of the earliest signs of tension surrounding Yoko and Pattie comes from the fact that Yoko, despite her bold and independent persona, was still human and prone to feelings of insecurity. Her marriage to John Lennon, which was marred by public scrutiny, was further complicated by the presence of Pattie Boyd in John's life. Pattie had not only been George Harrison's wife, but was also someone with whom John had formed a friendship during their years together in the Beatles. The bonds shared between Pattie and both Harrison and Lennon likely created an atmosphere of lingering history and emotional connections. Though John's relationship with Pattie was never romantic after George and Pattie's divorce, it was still a connection that was difficult for Yoko to ignore. From Yoko's perspective, Pattie represented a past chapter in John's life, a time before she entered the picture. This alone could have fueled feelings of jealousy, whether they were based on actual tension or imagined by Yoko herself. Pattie's relationship with John Lennon post-divorce. After her divorce from George Harrison, Pattie Boyd maintained a cordial relationship with John Lennon. The two often moved in the same social circles, especially in the aftermath of the Beatles' disbandment. John and Pattie were frequent companions at various social gatherings and events, which might have been perceived as a constant reminder to Yoko of the former relationships John had with other women. While it's essential to note that the friendship between John and Pattie appeared to be entirely platonic, there's no denying that Yoko might have been sensitive to their connection. In any marriage, especially one under the public eye like John and Yoko's, any lingering ties to an ex could potentially spark feelings of jealousy, even if the ex was merely a friend. The idea of a shared past may have created a situation where Yoko felt insecure or at the very least, uncomfortable with Pattie's continued presence in John's life. The role of the media. The media played a significant role in fueling the narrative of rivalry between Yoko and Pattie. The press, always hungry for scandal and sensationalism, often exaggerated the interactions between the two women, whether there was tension or not. Tabloid reports painted a picture of Yoko as the jealous wife who couldn't cope with Pattie's lingering influence in John's life. Given that the Beatles and their personal lives were an obsession for the public, the media's narrative likely shaped the public's perception of the relationship between Yoko and Pattie. While there are no concrete reports of Yoko openly expressing jealousy or animosity toward Pattie, the way the media constructed their relationship might have amplified these emotions. In the world of celebrity, perception often outweighs reality, and the image of Yoko as a jealous wife became one that the media, and by extension the public, clung to. Yoko's one perspective. Yoko Ono, the avant-garde artist, musician, and widow of John Lennon, has long been a figure of both admiration and vilification. For much of her life, Yoko faced intense public scrutiny, and her relationship with John was subject to an overwhelming amount of external judgment. One of the most prominent narratives associated with Yoko Ono is that she was responsible for the breakup of the Beatles, a story that has plagued her for decades. However, looking beyond the public perception, one can see the struggles and insecurities that Yoko likely experienced throughout her life, particularly in relation to her marriage to John Lennon and the burden of being labeled the other woman. Yoko's own struggles with public perception. When Yoko married John Lennon in 1969, she became an instant target for public criticism. The Beatles were an institution, and their breakup, which occurred shortly after John and Yoko's relationship began, was met with widespread speculation about the reasons behind it. Yoko was often vilified by fans and the media as the primary cause of the band's split, a narrative that she was forced to endure throughout their marriage and beyond. The public's tendency to blame her for the Beatles' dissolution undoubtedly fueled insecurities, as she was seen as the disruptor of the harmony that had once existed within the band. The constant media frenzy surrounding her relationship with John could have made her feel both isolated and alienated from the world she had once been part of, while simultaneously increasing the pressure to prove her worth as an artist and individual beyond her connection to John. Moreover, the way in which the public perception was shaped likely influenced how Yoko viewed herself. The idea that she was a divisive figure may have made her feel the need to assert herself more aggressively, not only in terms of her identity, but also in her relationship with John. This desire to prove her worth might have contributed to her more assertive and sometimes controversial artistic endeavors. In a way, Yoko's desire to assert herself publicly and personally could have been a defense mechanism against the overwhelming criticism she faced. The burden of the other woman label. Another significant challenge that Yoko Ono faced was the other woman label that was thrust upon her by the public. Many fans of the Beatles were quick to blame Yoko for John's departure from his first wife, Cynthia Lennon. However, this narrative failed to acknowledge that John's marriage to Cynthia was already in a state of disrepair when he met Yoko. John himself had admitted to his marital struggles and infidelities prior to his relationship with Yoko. Despite this, the public continued to vilify Yoko as the person who stole John away, positioning her as the villain in the drama of their marriage. This perception could have caused Yoko to experience feelings of insecurity, not only toward other women like Pattie Boyd, who was married to George Harrison, but toward anyone who had a history with John before her. The public's obsession with John's past relationships, including his earlier marriages, placed an undue strain on Yoko, as it overshadowed her own individuality and accomplishments. She became defined by her association with John, which likely created a sense of inferiority and anxiety that was difficult to shake off. Yoko's artistic identity and the strain of her relationship with John. Throughout her career, Yoko Ono struggled to assert her artistic identity in the shadow of John Lennon's fame. While their relationship was a deeply creative and collaborative one, it was also one that was fraught with challenges. The constant public scrutiny of their personal lives, coupled with the immense pressure of being married to one of the most famous men in the world, likely took a toll on Yoko's sense of self. Despite her own innovative artistic contributions, she was often dismissed by critics and fans who viewed her as merely the wife of John Lennon, a dynamic that likely exacerbated her insecurities. Furthermore, the intrusion into her personal life, especially during the time when she and John were still alive, created an environment of constant emotional strain. Yoko was not only fighting to maintain her relationship with John, but was also attempting to carve out a place for herself in the art world. However, her identity as an artist was often overshadowed by her role as John Lennon's wife, which led to frustration and a sense of inadequacy. In this sense, the weight of public perception, combined with the pressures of living up to the legacy of the Beatles, might have fueled a deeper insecurity within Yoko. Pattie Boyd's perspective. Pattie Boyd's perspective on her emotional journey, especially as it relates to her relationships with George Harrison and Eric Clapton, is one of complexity, resilience, and personal growth. Throughout her life, she navigated the intense public scrutiny that came with being married to two of rock music's most iconic figures, and yet she has consistently spoken with grace and introspection about her experiences. Her emotional journey, particularly in the context of her tumultuous relationships, offers a unique lens through which to understand her resilience and personal evolution. Pattie's first marriage to George Harrison was fraught with emotional turbulence. George, while deeply involved in spiritual pursuits, struggled with infidelities that left Pattie feeling emotionally neglected and distant. As a woman married to one of the Beatles, Pattie was thrust into a world of fame and expectations that were overwhelming. George's dedication to his spiritual path and his constant touring meant that Pattie was often left to grapple with feelings of loneliness. Her emotional distance from George eventually led to their separation, but the challenges didn't end there. When Pattie married Eric Clapton, she found herself once again in a relationship filled with both intense passion and emotional strain. Clapton's struggles with addiction and his own personal demons created a volatile environment that mirrored some of the difficulties she had faced in her marriage to George. However, the public's fascination with Pattie and her relationships only intensified, as she became the subject of public speculation and media attention. In many ways, Pattie was seen not just as George Harrison's ex-wife, but as a central figure in a narrative involving two of rock's most beloved musicians. This scrutiny made it even more difficult for her to find peace within herself. Despite the emotional roller coasters of these relationships, Pattie's perspective on the infamous love triangle involving John Lennon and Yoko Ono has remained remarkably different from what one might expect. Rather than succumbing to feelings of jealousy or resentment toward Yoko, Pattie has consistently expressed respect for John Lennon and his artistic legacy. While the media and public often speculated about the rivalry between the women, Pattie never seemed to embrace the role of a scorned ex-wife, instead focusing on her admiration for John as a person and artist. Her relationship with John was grounded in friendship, and Pattie has described him as a man of great warmth and creativity. She maintained a deep respect for John even after their marriage ended, emphasizing that her emotional connection to him was one of mutual understanding and shared experiences, not competition with Yoko. Pattie's ability to rise above the drama that surrounded her personal life is a testament to her emotional resilience and personal growth. Over time, she gained clarity about her own needs and desires, and as she began to speak more openly about her past, she acknowledged the complexity of her relationships without casting blame. Pattie's perspective on her marriages and her interactions with John and Yoko demonstrates a woman who learned to find peace within herself rather than letting public opinion or the expectations of others define her. In the years following her marriages, Pattie has grown into a strong, independent woman, no longer defined by her associations with George Harrison or Eric Clapton. Instead, she has become an icon in her own right, someone who has learnt from her experiences and used those lessons to forge her own path. Pattie's journey is a reminder that emotional growth is a continuous process, one that doesn't end with the end of a marriage or a relationship, but rather evolves as we learn to understand ourselves more deeply. The media played a pivotal role in shaping the public's view of Yoko Ono, often framing her as the villain who was responsible for the breakup of the Beatles. This narrative was perpetuated by tabloids and sensationalist stories that painted Yoko as the disruptive force in John Lennon's life, a perception she struggled to overcome throughout her career. The portrayal of Yoko as the other woman in a legendary band's collapse was not just an attack on her relationship with John, but a broader reflection of society's tendency to place blame on women in such situations. This intense media scrutiny may have heightened any perceived rivalry between Yoko and Pattie Boyd, though Pattie herself has always been candid in downplaying any such feelings. Pattie's role in the media's portrayal of the situation was more passive. She was often cast as the sweet, slightly tragic figure caught between two rock legends. Her image as the wronged ex-wife of George Harrison and muse to both George and Eric Clapton, she became a key part of her public persona, although she was rarely the center of the storm. As a result, Pattie's life and relationships were viewed through a lens of sympathy and fascination, adding to the allure of her story. Like, comment, and share for more on Pattie Boyd's emotional journey and her impact on rock history.